Hi, thank you for coming to Cleveland. I work with the Legal Aid Society, and we advocate for a lot of families with children with special needs to access educational programs for them. And I'm curious to know, you talked a lot about changing expectations for the second grade class. Has there been changes in programming for kids with special needs and expectations for them?
I do not think that there really has been. I think that the district struggles, like a lot of urban school districts do, to serve the broad range of children with special needs and to get the right people. I can speak quite personally about this because my daughter has some developmental delays and receives special ed services through the district, and I have to say they're the part of the district that I'm the least happy with. So I think, and I think one of the problems is the way that our special ed services are structured. They bring together kids that have a really broad range of issues, some of them having to do with poverty, some of them having to do with lack of strong parental support, some having to do with physical issues, some having to do with emotional or behavioral issues, and they group them all together and try to address them all. And that's kind of a bad system, in my opinion. And I think it's an issue of resources almost more than anything else. Wealthier districts have more resources to devote to the problem, and so I think you do find better organized special ed programs in better funded districts. But no, I do think in that respect, the idea of the Kalamazoo Promise funding any kind of career and technical training is a very important one, because for a lot of these kids that are not on a traditional path to a four-year bachelor's in political science, say, what I teach, there are a lot of other options for people with different skills. So I think that's important. Another important aspect of the Kalamazoo Promise scholarship that I didn't address is that it is one of the only scholarships available for undocumented Hispanic students. So we have a population of Hispanic kids in the school district that is larger than the officially registered population in the city, and a number of those students are undocumented. Most scholarships are not available to those students, but the Kalamazoo Promise is. It is an issue of residency and enrollment in the district. As long as that can be documented, that's what we're looking for. So thank you for your question.
Hi, my name is Dieric, and I'm from John F. Kennedy High School. I was wondering, what are some steps students can take to create a scholarship like that?
To create your own scholarship program to offer for other kids, or to be able to benefit from it?
Not more say who we could talk to
in your own community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there are people in this community who've been watching Kalamazoo, and I've interacted with some of them at very preliminary stages. I think there are a lot of people in communities like Cleveland. A lot of the interest in this promise-type model comes from the Northeast, the upper Midwest, because we all have the same problems in our community. And somehow this program people can intuitively understand how this kind of program gets at a bunch of those problems simultaneously. So I think there are people in your community who are thinking about, could a Cleveland Promise be something that we could do here? How could we do it? And I think that there'll be opportunities for students to weigh in on that issue. In the meantime, and this is always sort of a hard thing to say, but in the meantime, there are a lot of scholarships out there. I did kind of a count for my book, and I found literally millions of scholarships. Now, the problem is they are not easy to access. It's not like you fill out a one-page form and you get your scholarship. But if you're from a low-income family, if you're first generation going to college, there is money available for you. And thankfully, the Congress and the administration have seen fit to start increasing the level of Pell Grants available. They were capped at a low rate for many years, and they have in fact started to rise to keep pace with rising tuition. So having, I would start by encouraging your school to make sure that they bring people in to support you and your families in filling out your free application for federal student aid. Make sure that every kid in your school is getting every dollar of scholarship money that they are entitled to, because a lot of that money, to be honest, is left on the table because people don't apply for it. And I would go out with the assumption that if you set your mind on going to college, you will find the money to get you there. I know that seems kind of backwards thinking, but I think the money is there. It just is harder to get than it is in Kalamazoo. So anyway, let me leave it at that.
Hi. You had mentioned that for strategic reasons, the plan had been devised to provide for first dollar funding, and I was wondering if you could share those strategic reasons. And also, I think you had mentioned that $17 million has been spent
Right.
in the program.
Right.
If a last dollar funding model had been used, how much would that $17 million have been? I assume it would have been less.
Right, yes, it would have been considerably less. I think the reason a first dollar program was devised was for two reasons. The sake of simplicity, to lower not only the financial barrier to college, but the actual ability to access those resources. Because, as I said, there's a lot of financial aid money on the table, but it's complicated and laborious to apply for it. But if all you have to do is fill out a one-page application, it's more likely kids will actually apply for that money. So they wanted to make the barriers to entry very, very low. And the other reason, of course, is assuming the donors are who most of us maybe think some of them are, they can afford it. So there was enough money to do that. I think in a community that's trying to put together the resources to fund a scholarship program, some of the communities that I've been involved in consulting to, we don't recommend first dollar programs. They tend to be about twice as expensive. So that bill probably would have been cut in half. Most of that money, if you look at what the relative cost of tuition at the University of Michigan and Michigan State versus Kalamazoo Valley Community College, a big chunk of that money is going to support those kids who are going to the University of Michigan. You can send 5 or 6 kids to the community college for the same price as one kid to the University of Michigan. So anyway, I think what's critical is when you're putting a scholarship program together that's not a first dollar program, that you give a lot of attention to this issue of the financial aid process, the financial aid application process. So bringing resources into the schools, into the community to make sure that every kid is able to get the scholarship money that they're entitled to, that that barrier is not too high to navigate is very, very important. There's a very interesting study that came out a couple of years ago. It's called, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, it's called the H&R Block FAFSA study. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it was a very great random assignment controlled experiment, the kind the economists all love. And it basically had people come in to prepare their taxes, and it broke them into groups. One group, they didn't do anything. One group, they gave them literature about college financial aid and the FAFSA. And the third group, they filled out the FAFSA for them. And then when they gave them their tax returns, they said, oh yes, and your kid could get this much money to go to college. They got a bigger bump in college attendance from simply filling out the form and telling people how much financial aid they were eligible for than pretty much any other scholarship support program out there. I mean, simply that act of filling out that form for a family and saying, hey, your kid can get $5,000 a year to go to college, sent more kids to college than many other much more complex strategies. So that suggests that it's critical to get at that accessing financial aid piece if you're going with a second dollar scholarship or a last dollar scholarship program.